Let me go to your predictions for the election. They're pretty bold. In fact, because they're so specific. You say, prediction in your top 10, number 8, 4 different people will win the first 4 states in the Democratic presidential primary to set a free-for-all for the nomination. It's never happened before. Explain it.
That's never happened before. There's a couple of times you've had 3 different people win the first 3 states. That happened in 2012 on the Republican side. But I just think you have a situation in this latest Iowa poll that came out from the Register speaks to this, in that you've got no candidate has really ironed out alone a base, except for one, Pete Buttigieg, which is the white Subaru driving, coexist bumper sticker having suburban cul-de-sac litter. Okay. and if you want to know how many of those there are in Iowa, that's Pete Buttigieg's base. He has no other base anywhere else in the state of Iowa. That's his base. It's just a bunch of white suburbanites that want you to know they're not homophobes. So they're voting for guilt. But for the other candidates that can actually win this nomination, they're splitting each other's factions. And when you have that, you're going to have a free-for-all. I think you look at Joe Biden, his number one argument is electability. Well, if you're going to finish 3rd or 4th in Iowa, what does that do to your electability argument? Now, I do think when we get one of the problems all the other candidates have is they don't have any substantive black support in this party. And while black voters do not make up the percentage of voters in the Democratic side, white evangelicals do on the Republican side, it's really difficult to get to a majority of Democrat voters without black support. He's the only one that has them. So in this crazy year, if my predictions sound nuts, consider this. The oldest looking sounding white guy in the race, who comes across incompetent most days, is the only one who has really any black support. So there you go. Okay. And,
wow.
And if he can just stay alive, if he can get to South Carolina and all those southern states that come in on Super Tuesday, he could certainly win enough of those. It wouldn't give him the nomination, but it would keep him alive to a convention. And then I think whoever emerges from those first 4 states between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, whoever cancels the other out is going to win California. And if you've got Joe Biden winning the old Democratic Party and you have Bernie Sanders and or Elizabeth Warren winning the current Democratic Party, that is the prescription for a brokered convention.
So you have Pete Buttigieg winning Iowa, Bernie Sanders, New Hampshire, Elizabeth Warren, Nevada, and then Biden in South Carolina.
And I still think, even though Buttigieg's numbers have dipped quite a bit in that Iowa poll, the reason he could possibly still win is how strong Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are. We talked last week, I talked about the fact that Elizabeth Warren's dipping, then when they get into that caucus room and they start straw polling each other, those leftists huddle together and like, hey, we either hang together or we hang separately here. One of these guys or gals has got to go. Well, if they both go in there with a reasonable expectation of winning, it's going to be really difficult to have that kind of a conversation. And I could see the socialists or the Soviets, because they're both socialists, Freudian slip. I could see the Soviets and the more softer side of Sears' version that Elizabeth Warren represents kind of canceling each other out. And then I could see a Pete Buttigieg with 19, 20, 21, 22% eking out a small victory here. But
Steve,
that would have to be his scenario.
It's interesting, Steve, because what you described with the first 4 states is the dream scenario of one Michael Bloomberg, who is currently running basically unopposed in the Super Tuesday states and throwing $250 million at that. If this comes together, does he make a dent? Does he win a couple of these states?
He doesn't represent either Democratic Party. I think Michael Bloomberg's long-term game here is I think he's game planning that this thing goes all the way to Milwaukee. And they have to come out of here with – and you have to understand, Bloomberg comes from this old political model. 40% of people are Republicans, 40% are Democrats, and elections are won by the 20% in the middle. And Barack Obama and social media wrecked all of that. National elections are now determined by who can frame the battlefield for the most max base turnout. Mitt Romney is the first candidate ever to win independence in 2012 and lose an election. So that model is antiquated. But I think he's operating on that model, and he's going by, hey, they got to come out of a convention with some kind of compromise candidate, and maybe that could be me.
And you say that there's going to be a move at the convention to nominate Michelle Obama as the compromise candidate.
Yeah, she's the most logical name. But, you don't leave a 70,000 square foot palatial estate what Martha's Vineyard or whatever they just bought, in order to get called trashy Michelle by Trump on Twitter for 3 months. You're not doing that. So I think that'll be the fantasy of several on cable news networks and within the leftist intelligentsia, and it will be entertained there quite heavily. But I don't think that she's going to come off the bench and take that kind of a beating, because right now she can say whatever she wants, do whatever she wants, make as much money as she wants, and have none of the daily grind of actually being a candidate.
So when she's not the candidate, you believe it will be?
I think it'll be Bernie Sanders, because if you go to a brokered convention, there's two ways you win there, guys. One way is you're everybody's second safe choice. There isn't one of those in this race. There's nobody everybody else looks at and says, all right, I guess we can handle that. And so if you're not going to win with a second safe choice, then it's triumph of the will, if you get the analogy reference I'm making. And you win with a hammer and a sickle and an iron fist, and you scare the hell out of the system with a mobocracy. If you look at Wisconsin, that's where a lot of the modern leftist mobocracy that we have come to know today was born, going after Scott Walker. That base of people is still there. That is a native tongue to Bernie Sanders as an Alinskyite. And so I think you scare the Democrats to death with, we're going to make Chicago 68 look like it's a small world after all.
Wow.
Okay, when it's closed, or you give us the nomination. And so since they don't have a logical second candidate, that would be a rallying point for the various constituencies in their confederacy, then I think it becomes a mobocracy game, and I can't see anybody edging Bernie Sanders out where that's concerned.